Thank you, Prof. Koh. My name is Samuel Locke. Talking about the process in which our elected presidency have evolved, I feel good that we have seen 11 constitutional amendments. But if the key role of the president is to safeguard reserves, then perhaps the concept of risk management ought to be integrated into this process. Now, I understand that the legal operations from a limited understanding of law requires legal precedent. But I think, do we not think that we need innovation also and adaptation to changing realities as the other part of the process of the operation of law? So if we take an example, TEPCO in Japan, why did this thing happen to Japan, and why was the impact so heavy? It wasn't because TEPCO didn't do anything. It was a disagreement on the envelope of risk that was involved. So there was seismologist evidence to say that we will have a tsunami of this scale, and TEPCO settled for a smaller scale tsunami and built a smaller seawall. There was a seawall that was built, money was spent, but it wasn't high enough. And that shortage of 5 meters of that seawall was all it took for the tsunami to come in and destroy the rest of the thing. So what if we have a situation in the country where, in private, the people in government have one perception of the envelope of risk, the president sees a different envelope of risk. And if I may quote, I think a former chairman of Harvard Board of Governors, he used to say this. He said, I get worried when there's not enough debate in a government Board of Governors decision. So I can understand the separation of powers, smooth running of a government, and I agree with that. But what if the situation is so dire and the envelope perceptions are so different, and that needs great debate? Would the government consider a situation of a 12th amendment and say for certain things under mutual consent that you might have different points of view add out there? Because I know this is politically sensitive probably, but what if the envelope of risk is so great? What provisions do we have under the existing system to safeguard Singapore?
I think we got your question, yeah. but you know, and I asked both Minister and Leanne to join me in responding. It's not an area in which the president has been empowered so that he can use his moral suasion to speak to the Prime Minister at a weekly meeting, to share with him his concern that maybe we are under-providing, that maybe our risk scenario is not adequate. But I think it's not an area in which the President can prevail over the Cabinet.
Yeah. You see, any system devised by man, any political system, ultimately it has got to be run by people. And people are imperfect. So whatever system you have, it's a question of whether they have the competence, the skill, the judgment to come to the right decision. If we didn't have the elected presidency, all these decisions would have to be made ultimately by the companies concerned and by the regulators and, where necessary, by the ministers. That the fact that we have an elected presidency with a specific set of powers doesn't give the president to intervene on these issues. The risk management approach is important, but it has got to be dealt with by the government.
And by the government, we would also include the role of the parliamentary opposition. You have to look at the bigger democratic checks and balances as well.
Okay, next question, please. Right at the back.
Yeah. My name is Tan Sri Peng, alumnus University of Malaya. It seems to me that before the 1991 amendment, traditionally, the president is only a ceremonial head. But by investing him with some political power, don't you think we are opening the Pandora's box? Because once he tasted the power, then he said more is better. So in that case, he will ask for more and more. That's why everybody thinks that the president can do this, can do that, can do that. And then, as you know, Lee Kuan Yew's got a good lawyer. He would say, okay, to control the damage, we try to reduce him by having this power limited in this area, that area, and so on. So I was thinking to the layman.
Okay, so what?
A president is a president.
What's your question?
Yeah.
Are you
so I was thinking, because of all this confusion and all that, everybody now get confused whether what president can do, cannot do. But if probably government can come up with some maybe white paper or yellow paper, whatever it is, setting up briefly what the president can and cannot do, in that case, then I think it will reduce the confusion.
Okay, so maybe I will misrepresent you by asking a question on your behalf, which is, given all this, should the government reconsider abolishing the elected presidency and going back to the status quo ante, or have the president elected by the parliament? I think professors like to speculate, right? And they are good at answering hypothetical questions. So I think I should ask Leanne to respond.
Well, okay, apparently you're asking me whether or not the presidency should be abolished because nobody understands how it works.
Yeah.
Okay, as an educator, I will say, then we need to learn to understand. And I think there have been very valiant efforts by the Ministry of Law and the Ministry of Finance. If you check their websites, there are all these explanatory notes. I think Singaporeans, we need to do the homework. This is a different issue this addresses the issue of understanding. The normative question of whether to have a president, well, I've written a lot on it. I'm not going to talk about it today.
Okay. Sean?
Well, it'll be interesting if the government went into yellow journalism, or yellow paper. But, there have been so many white papers which have explained the position of the elected president in very clear terms. There have been parliamentary debates. What I read out to you from Mr. Lee was only a very short excerpt. Then Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong explained it in great detail. Ministry of Law recently issued a statement saying what the powers are of the elected president. But at the end of the day, it depends on how much of this people really understand. And really in any democracy, in any open society, it's the task of the government to continue with the message and explain clearly what the powers are, what the issues are, and we will continue to try and do that.
Yeah, I agree. So I would just also say that it's a very unique institution. It's a very Singaporean invention. We have a parliamentary system. We have decided to give the president some specific powers in order to create a better system of checks and balances. It is a relatively new institution, so it will continue to evolve. And I think it's really premature to say that it's too controversial, too difficult, why don't we abolish it? So I think that I think it's a good invention. Let us try to make it work, try to explain to everybody, especially the electorate, what the president's empowered to do, what is not empowered to do. We need to educate all the aspirants for office. The fine line between what they can and should do and what the red line which they shouldn't cross. And I think on the case of the supporting the disabled, I gave a couple of examples where what is permissible, in fact, very good for the president to do, and where the red line is, and one shouldn't cross that red line, I think. So I think that you shouldn't be so discouraged and pessimistic. Let's make the institution work, I think.